the ominous board. I recently moved into a charming old house, nestled at the edge of a quiet neighborhood. It was a place that seemed to hold endless possibilities. A place I was eager to make my own. The first week in the house went by smoothly as I excitedly unpacked my belongings and settled into my new surroundings. It wasn't until I decided to explore the basement that things took a sinister turn. As I descended the creaky wooden stairs into the dimly lit space, my heart skipped a beat. There, in a dusty corner, lay an old weathered Ouija board. I couldn't help but shudder at the sight. The Ouija board, with its eerie alphabet and mysterious symbols, had always filled me with a sense of foreboding. It was not something I had ever wanted to encounter, especially in my own home. Curiosity gnawed at me, though, and I decided to examine the board. The wood was worn, and the letters and numbers had faded with time, but it was still in decent condition. I picked up the planchette and couldn't resist the urge to try it out, just once, for old time's sake. I placed my fingers lightly on the planchette and began to ask a question. "Is there anyone here with us?" I whispered, half expecting nothing to happen. To my shock, the planchette began to move on its own, slowly spelling out words. Yes. My heart raced and a chill ran down my spine. I couldn't believe what was happening. I asked another question. "Who are you?" The planchette spelled out a name, one that sent shivers down my spine. Malcolm. I had no idea who Malcolm was, but the sensation in the room grew heavier, and the air thick with an unsettling presence. I hastily said goodbye and moved the planchette to goodbye, ending the session. I put the Ouija board back in the corner and left the basement, my heart pounding in my chest. As I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone in the house. Strange, unexplainable occurrences began to happen. Doors would creak open on their own, and whispers echoed through the halls when I was certain I was alone. I felt an ever-present sense of dread. One evening, I returned to the basement to find the Ouija board had moved from its corner, positioned ominously in the center of the room. Panic set in, and I decided to get rid of it once and for all. I wrapped it in a cloth and buried it deep in the backyard, hoping to rid myself of the malevolent presence that had invaded my home. But things only grew worse. The oppressive atmosphere in the house intensified, and I began to have terrifying nightmares. Desperate and afraid, I reached out to a local paranormal expert who confirmed my worst fears. I had unwittingly summoned a malevolent spirit through the Ouija board. The expert performed a cleansing ritual, but it was clear that Malcolm did not want to leave my newfound home. I had no choice but to move out, leaving the curse house and the haunting memories behind. As I walked away from that place, I couldn't help but wonder if Malcolm still lurked in the shadows, waiting for his next victim to stumble upon the ominous Ouija board in the basement. Terrifying encounter. It was a chilly evening when my best friend, Sarah, and I decided to delve into the world of the supernatural. We had always been intrigued by the unknown, and our curiosity had led us to a fateful encounter with a Ouija board. We gathered in my dimly lit basement, surrounded by an eerie silence that seemed to hang in the air like a shroud. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows on the walls and setting the perfect ambience for our paranormal experiment. The Ouija board rested on a rickety table in the center of the room, its letters, numbers, and the yes and no printed on it. As we placed our trembling fingers lightly on the planchette, we couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. "Is there anyone here with us?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The planchette remained still, mocking our expectations. But just when we were about to give up, it began to move. Sarah. The letters spelled out Sarah's name, We exchanged bewildered glances and a shiver ran down my spine. "Sarah, is that you?" I stammered. Sarah's face was ashen. "No, it's not me, I swear." The planchette continued to move, spelling out words with chilling precision. It spelled out the words, "I want to leave." Panic gripped us, but our curiosity kept us rooted to our spots. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. The planchette moved again, spelling out a name that sent terror coursing through our veins. "Malachi." Before we could react, the room grew unbearably cold. The candle flames flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The planchette, now moving with unnatural speed, spelled out a horrifying message. "He's coming." Terror surged through us like a tidal wave. Who was coming? What did it mean? We tried to break contact with the Ouija board, but our hands seemed glued to the planchette. Suddenly, the room went dark. The candles extinguished one by one, and we were plunged into an inky blackness, panic-stricken. We fumbled for our phones to use their flashlights. As our beams of light pierced the darkness, we saw a shadowy figure at the far end of the room. It was a tall, hunched silhouette with glowing red eyes. The whispers grew louder, more menacing. "He's coming," they hissed. In a final act of desperation, we managed to break our connection with the Ouija board. The planchette fell to the table with a thud, and the room returned to its eerie silence. The shadowy figure vanished. Sarah and I fled from the basement, leaving the Ouija board behind. That night, we vowed never to dabble in the supernatural again, but the memory of our encounter with the Ouija board still haunts us. A chilling reminder that some doors should never be opened, and some questions should never be asked. Ouija board horror story. What I'm about to share with you is a chilling story of a horrifying experience my two classmates and I had with a Ouija board. It happened a few years ago during our sophomore year of college. It all began innocently enough. My friends, Kara and Chris, and I were curious about the supernatural. Late one Friday evening, we decided to explore the mysterious world of the paranormal by using a Ouija board. Kara had borrowed it from her cousin, who warned us to be cautious, but never truly believed in its power. As the night settled in, we gathered in my dimly lit dorm room, candles flickering in the shadows. We followed all the rules we'd read online, and we placed our fingers lightly on the planchette, closed our eyes, and began asking questions. At first, nothing happened. We laughed nervously, thinking it was just a silly game. But then, the planchette moved. It was a slow, deliberate glide, and spelling out words. "Hello." It wrote. Our hearts raced, and we exchanged anxious glances. We continued to ask questions, and the responses became increasingly unsettling. The board claimed to be the spirit of a young girl named Emily who had passed away in our dorm room decades ago. We tried to convince ourselves it was just one of us, pushing the planchette, but none of us were willing to admit to it. As the minutes turned into hours, the air felt colder, and we could hear faint whispers and soft laughter that seemed to emanate from the walls. Emily, or whatever entity we were communicating with, started to reveal personal details about us that no one else could have known. Our fear intensified as the entity grew more aggressive, spelling out ominous messages like "she's here" and "don't look." Terrified, we decided to end the session and say goodbye to Emily, but the planchette refused to move. Panic set in as we struggled to break contact with the board. It felt as though an unseen force was holding our hands in place, and the room grew unbearably cold. Suddenly, the candles flickered, and the room plunged into darkness. We heard Emily's voice echoing through the room, her whispers growing louder and more menacing. Our screams filled the air as we desperately tried to flee the room. In the darkness, we stumbled over each other, clawing our way to the door. Finally, we burst out into the corridor, gasping for breath. We never looked back, and the Ouija board was left behind, its dark secrets locked in that dorm room forever. Kara, Chris, and I have never spoken about that night since. We couldn't explain what happened, and we didn't want to. All I know is that the paranormal is very real, and that Ouija board unleashed something terrifying that night. I still shudder at the memory of that chilling encounter.